All right, students, here we go again. Part two, talking about the psychodynamic theory of personality. Defense mechanisms are, are behaviors or actions or thoughts that we take when we are challenged between our superego, our ideal, and our reality and our id, what we really want to do. Now, I'm not going to go over what these pictures are, but I am going to talk about each of these on the next slide. Defense mechanisms are commonly used. They're in our common language. And even though psychodynamic psychologists no longer use the terms id, ego, and superego, they will use these terms, defense mechanisms, in order to describe one's behavior. So if we look at a definition, first of all, when we have a conflict between our id's wishes and our superego's conscience, we get anxiety, okay? So like, whoa, I can't figure out what to do here. My ego's not helping me a whole lot. So these defense mechanisms help us ease tension that we feel from that conflict, and they help preserve our self-esteem. Now, I'm going to give some examples of these, and then I have also posted on today's Schoology an online practice of these defense mechanisms. They are something that you're going to want to know, and you're going to want to know the terms. The first one is regression. Now, regression occurs when we are particularly going through a change in our life. Let's say you're 5 and you have a younger sibling born, and you were used to being the light and the star of your parents' universe. And now there's this baby that cries and it pees and it's getting all this attention, and you're like, dang, I want that attention. I know I'm supposed to like this baby. Everyone keeps telling me I'm supposed to like this baby, but I don't like this baby. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to act like the baby. So you might start, um, you know, having an accident in your pants. You might start sucking your thumb. You might start crying more. Anytime someone goes through these big changes in life, it's possible that they might regress. Going off to college, oftentimes students are like, whoa, I'm so excited. I'm going to college. I'm not going to call my parents. Like, I don't even need to talk to them anymore. And then what do they do when they have a problem? They call their parents. Okay, so think of regression as something that happens when you are particularly stressed due to a change in your life. Now, this next one is a really, I think, like football or maybe even rugby are the ultimate examples of this next one. The next one is called sublimation. So, the foundation of Freud's idea about the id is that it is just filled with these sexual or aggressive desires. And so in society, that's not acceptable to act on those all the time. So what we do instead is we sublimate those aggressive desires or those sexual desires in what are considered socially acceptable ways. So whether we watch football or we play football, the idea here is that we're sublimating this pent-up energy that we have as humans in a way that is socially acceptable. This could be true for artists as well. Um, and I've known examples of this, and this is one that actually can be really quite positive. There was a kid that was on my son's wrestling team. He was the captain of his wrestling team his senior year of high school, and one of the teachers at the school, who was a coach, recruited this young man to be on the wrestling team. This guy was a bundle of energy, and he was not using it productively. When he got on the wrestling team, he learned how to sublimate that energy in productive ways, graduated from high school, went to college. Oh, by the way, he was adopted in the process as well. So sublimation can be terribly, not terribly, it can be tremendously useful. Dang, have you ever just thought, I, I, I really think that teacher hates me. Like, I can just tell that teacher just hates me. But what do you really mean? Like, honestly, what do you really mean? Um, Perhaps you really mean, I really hate that teacher. Okay. Now, granted, I do know that some people say they hate their teacher, but sometimes we do this for people who are in positions of power over us. My manager, I think they really hate me. And instead, you really hate that manager. Or, Susan, she's such a gossip. I can't believe how much she gossips. And by the way, did you hear about what um, Maria did last week? Oh my gosh. Okay, so think of the projection as projection as like a projector. You're projecting, okay, your own unconscious feelings or thoughts onto others, just like a projector projects a screen onto the, I'm sorry, it projects a picture, an image onto the screen. You are the projector and you're projecting it onto somebody else. Now, this next one is terrifically sad, actually. There have been many examples of this one in the news. There have been so many, it's hard for me to just narrow it down to one, and I don't even know that I want to talk about them online, but I will talk about one. This was a highly prominent political figure in a very large state, and he had been working as Attorney General and speaking up against organized crime. However, one day it became news that he actually was involved in organized crime, in particular in a prostitution ring. And throughout the course of his time visiting this particular prostitute, he had spent $85,000 of his state's money as the Attorney General for the very thing that he opposed. This is called reaction formation. There are many examples of this, like I say, in the news, but some other examples might be people who have been outspoken opponents of LGBT rights, and then they come out and they say, actually, I am gay. And so what they have been doing is in their public persona, they have portrayed themselves in a particular way because of the conflict that they feel about their own selves and what they're doing. And then eventually, they end up having to face it. Many times they don't. Sometimes they keep living with this lie, and sometimes really hurting a lot of people along the way by acting in one way in public, while in their private life they're doing the exact opposite. Now, rationalization, whatever. It was okay to cheat on that test. I mean, really, it was an unfair test. Like, Mrs. Mathers didn't even teach us that material. Like, and she thought we were going to read the textbook. Like, seriously. Like, you know, that was an unfair test. Okay, that's rationalization. It's basically making excuses for things, for example, for not being prepared for a test, for not studying the material that you're asked to study. Now, I admit there are teachers that do make unfair tests. I try not to be one of them. I try to give you the information that you need before a test, but that is one that is definitely used by many people when they've done something that they know is wrong. Their super ego is telling them this is wrong, but they don't want to face it, and so they come up with an excuse. Now, rationalization is a little bit different from denial. It's possible that you live with a family member who has a chemical dependency problem, and it is possible that you live with a family member who has mental illness. The problem with both of these, chemical dependency or mental illness, is that a lot of times we want to deny that something unpleasant is happening or is a problem. It might be ourselves, it might be a loved one. Having been through this with family members, it's really hard to know when that family member perhaps has crossed over a line into really needing some help for a mental illness. And oftentimes it's quite cultural as well, in that in some cultures, heavy drinking is a norm, and we don't think of it as a problem, and we just say it's not a problem, even though it might start interfering with our lives and with our relationships. In some cultures, we don't want to accept that something like depression exists. I mean, what the heck, just, you know, pull up the bootstraps and just keep moving on. And so we deny that there's a problem. And so denial itself is a problem when it keeps us from getting help for either ourselves or someone that we care about. And I'm sure that you can all think of an example of that. Now, repression is a controversial defense mechanism, and not all psychologists believe in the notion of repression. So let's say someone was abused in their childhood, and somehow they're able to actually bury that recollection of those anxiety arousing thoughts or feelings in their unconscious. So basically, they can't remember it, they can't think about it, they can't process it because they have repressed it. I personally do not think too highly of the concept of repression, although I do know of people that have experienced repression that I have seen in my own lifetime that have seemingly forgotten something that would be quite traumatic, probably, and yet they seem to have buried it in their unconscious. Well, you know what? Dang it. It's just been a really rough day. I am really not happy with, my principal or my students. So, you know what? I think I am just going to go home and you know what? My kids are home and my kids are going to still, have to stay there. So I think when I get home, I'm just going to yell at them. Okay? So that's displacement, you guys. And I'm sure you've all done this. Maybe you've had a bad day yourself. And instead of, just like dealing with it, accepting it, thinking it through, you go home and you yell at your mom. And you're like, well, I don't want that for dinner tonight. Why are you making that for dinner? Now, some people call this the kick the cat or kick the dog syndrome. They get so mad that they, kick something, an animal. I would never do that. I think that's very horrible. So, all of you who are gasping right now, you can stop gasping. I don't kick animals. However, it is very likely that you have either used this defense mechanism on somebody else or someone has used it on you. I cannot yell at my students unreasonably if I'm frustrated, or I can't go to my principal and complain that I don't like the way he's doing things, even though I do. I like you, Mr. Principal. But I can go home, and I may go home, and indeed I might shift that unacceptable impulse. I want to hit I want to, hit a hole in the wall at school here, although it would hurt because it's brick, but I can't do it. So I get home and you know what? I yell at my kids. That is a very commonly used defense mechanism. Now, identification. Some of this is the picture is blocked by my picture here, so I'm sorry about that. This one is called identification. What happens with this one, and this is one that we see happen in groups. So the person actually changes to try to fit in or identify with someone who might be different from them. So they might take on the persona, the clothing, the speech, the attitudes of those who they want to be more like, and can actually, in some cases, be transformed wholly or partially that the model that they're watching provides. This can be dangerous in things like groups that are extreme groups like neo-Nazis or something like that, where people identify to try to find a place to fit in if it's an unhealthy place to be, but they just want to be part of that group. Now, there are a lot of other ways that identification is described in the psychodynamic literature. This is the one I am choosing to use. Once again, thank you for your attention, and there will be more on the psychodynamic theory.